The mismatched marriage. A highborn lady, a wild duke, and the love no one expected. On the morning Chloe married the wild Duke of Winthorpe, half the church agreed the match was a disaster waiting to happen. She's far too refined for him. Lady Weatherby whispered behind her fan as Rowan Hale arrived 3 minutes late, his dark hair wind-tousled. A small leaf caught on his shoulder from riding hard across country to reach the ceremony on time. And he's far too rough for her, someone else murmured, watching Chloe stand perfectly composed at the altar. Every hair in place, her gown immaculate, her face betraying nothing of the terror churning beneath her ribs. Everyone in London society knew this arranged marriage was a spectacular mismatch. The question was only how spectacularly it would fail. Hello, lovely. If you're enjoying the story of two people who don't fit on paper, but might just fit in practice, I'd be so grateful for a like or subscribe. It helps me bring you more tales where differences become strengths and love arrives when you stop trying to force a perfect match. And if you'd like, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your presence makes these stories matter. 1. Chloe had been trained her entire life for one purpose: to be perfect. Perfect posture, perfect manners, perfect responses to every social situation. Her mother had drilled into her that a lady's reputation was the only currency that mattered, and Chloe had learned the lesson well. Too well, perhaps. Now, at 23, she stood at the altar of St. Margaret's Church watching her future husband arrive late to his own wedding, and every instinct screamed that this marriage would destroy the careful perfection she'd spent a lifetime building. Rowan Hale, Duke of Winthorpe, strode up the aisle with an easy confidence that suggested he'd never worried about what anyone thought of him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the weathered look of a man who spent more time outdoors than in drawing rooms. His formal clothes fit well, but somehow looked uncomfortable on him, like a costume he'd been forced into. When he reached the altar, he met her eyes with surprising directness and murmured, "Sorry." Horse threw a shoe on the north road. Chloe's mother made a strangled sound from the front pew. One did not discuss horses during wedding ceremonies. But Rowan seemed genuinely apologetic, and there was something in his steady gaze that suggested he took this marriage seriously even if he didn't take social convention seriously at all. The marriage was arranged out of necessity. Chloe's father had made catastrophic investments that nearly ruined their family. The scandal had been covered up, but only barely. They needed an alliance with someone powerful enough to restore their standing. Rowan's estate needed political connections Chloe's family could provide. His late father had alienated half of Parliament with his brutal business practices, and Rowan was trying to rebuild Winthorpe's reputation. A practical arrangement, beneficial to both sides. They'd met exactly 4 times before today. Brief, awkward meetings where he'd seemed distracted, and she'd been too nervous to be anything but rigidly polite. Now the vicar was speaking, and Chloe responded with her vows in a clear, controlled voice. When Rowan spoke his vows, she noticed he didn't look frightened. He looked determined, which somehow unnerved her more than nervousness would have. The reception at her family's London townhouse was precisely orchestrated. Chloe gave a graceful, brief toast thanking everyone for attending and praising the auspicious alliance of their families. Exactly what was expected. Then Rowan stood, and Chloe's stomach dropped. "I want to thank everyone who made today possible," he began, and that was fine. Traditional, safe. Then he added, "Especially the staff who worked through the night. My stable hands rode 12 hours to bring those flowers from Winthorpe's hothouses. Mrs. Bramble and the kitchen staff prepared this meal on impossibly short notice. Thank you all." He raised his glass toward the servants standing at attention along the walls. A shocked silence fell across the room. One did not acknowledge servants during toasts. One certainly didn't thank them publicly as though they were equals. Chloe felt her face burn with mortification. Beside her, her mother had gone rigid. After the toast, Chloe found Rowan in a side room. "You can't keep doing things like that." He looked genuinely confused. "Doing what?" "Thanking the servants, in front of everyone, during the formal toasts." "Why not?" "They did the work." "Because it's not done." Chloe fought to keep her voice steady. "There are rules, protocols, things that simply aren't appropriate. Treating people like human beings is inappropriate." His voice held an edge now. "Then your rules need examining. They're not my rules. They're society's rules. And if you want to survive in this world, maybe I don't want to survive in a world where basic decency is scandalous. They stared at each other across the small room, and Chloe realized with sinking certainty that this marriage was going to be even more difficult than she'd feared. I'm trying to help you, she said quietly. I don't need help being less myself. Rowan's voice softened slightly. But I understand this is new for you too. I'll try to be mindful. It wasn't quite an apology, but it also wasn't continued argument. Chloe took it as the truce it was meant to be. That evening, they rode in his carriage toward Winthorpe Hall. The journey would take most of the night. They sat on opposite benches, the space between them feeling vast. Rowan made a few attempts at conversation, asked about her interests. She gave careful, polite answers, asked about his estate. He described the cliffs and moorland with genuine passion that she couldn't quite connect to. Through the window, Chloe watched London fade into countryside, then into wilder terrain. Dark fields gave way to rolling hills and distant cliffs barely visible in the moonlight. Winthorpe was remote, rugged, nothing like the manicured estate she knew. It's beautiful, Rowan said, following her gaze. Not refined beautiful, wild beautiful. I hope you'll see it that way eventually. Chloe said nothing. She couldn't imagine seeing anything wild as beautiful. Wildness meant chaos. Chaos meant loss of control. And she'd spent her entire life learning that control was the only thing keeping her safe. As the carriage rolled through the darkness toward her new life, Chloe wondered, had she just escaped one disaster only to walk directly into another? 2. They arrived at Winthorpe Hall near dawn. Chloe stepped from the carriage exhausted, expecting the formal reception she prepared for. Instead, 3 dogs immediately rushed the door, barking joyfully. Rowan laughed and greeted each one by name. Muddy Boots sat in the entrance hall. A window on the second floor was partially boarded up, clearly mid-repair. The staff lined up to greet her, but it was informal, warm smiles, genuine welcomes. The housekeeper, Mrs. Hedges, called Rowan our Rowan with obvious affection, immediately making Chloe feel like an outsider in her own home. Her lady's maid, Marjorie, looked around with barely concealed horror. Your Grace, where shall I unpack your trunks? The Duchess's chambers are in the east wing, Mrs. Hedges said cheerfully, though we'll need to give them a proper airing. Haven't been used since the late Duchess. Chloe's rooms were beautiful but clearly long neglected. Dust covers on furniture. Musty smell. This was not the grand welcome she'd anticipated. The first week was a series of small shocks. Breakfast was served in a bright morning room, rather than the formal dining room. Rowan appeared in shirt sleeves, already deep in conversation with a steward about a collapsed bridge and a tenant's sick child. Good morning, he said when he noticed Chloe. Did you sleep well? Yes, thank you. She sat precisely, hands folded. We're discussing the North Road repairs. What do you think, Duchess? Would you ride out with me later to see the village? I'd like your opinion on the school improvements. Chloe froze. I couldn't possibly. It's too soon, too improper. Improper to visit our own tenants? For me to be seen riding about the countryside alone with you, yes. We're married. Even so. Rowan looked baffled, but let it drop. The clashes continued, some serious, some almost funny. The dogs adopted Chloe immediately, following her everywhere despite her protests. One particularly enthusiastic hound left muddy paw prints across a priceless rug in the drawing room. Chloe stared in horror. Mrs. Hedges just laughed and called for cleaning supplies. That's Bruno, she said fondly. He's got no manners, but a good heart. Like the Duke himself, Chloe thought, but didn't say. She attempted to impose order by reorganizing household schedules, proper dinner times, formal menus, structured linen inventories. She was good at management. Her mother had trained her well, but she'd issued the changes without understanding what the household already did or why. The staff grew stiff. A subtle divide formed. The way things had always been done versus the new Duchess's way. Rowan noticed. They're not trying to undermine you. You're just fixing things that weren't broken. I'm trying to bring proper standards. Whose standards? London's. His frustration leaked through. This isn't a museum, Chloe. It's a working estate. People live here. The Rayall explosion came a week later, when he overheard her talking to Marjorie. If he would just behave like a proper duke, Chloe was saying, if he'd attend his appearance, speak more formally, stop treating servants like friends, things would be so much easier. Rowan appeared in the doorway. I'm not a project to be improved. Chloe's face flamed. You didn't marry a statue to be polished until it meets your specifications. You married me. His voice was controlled, but angry. I'm not going to sit in drawing rooms discussing curtains while the roads wash away and tenants go hungry. That's not being a duke. That's playing dress-up. He left, and Chloe sat in the sudden silence, feeling both justified and terrible. That evening, she couldn't sleep. Wandered down to the library and found Rowan there, studying estate maps by lamplight. He looked up, surprised. Can't sleep either? The bed is unfamiliar. Chloe moved closer to the table, studying the maps. What are you working on? Drainage plans. The South Fields flood every spring. I'm trying to figure out if we can redirect the water before the planting season. She looked at the careful notations, the obvious thought that had gone into the plans. May I? He gestured for her to sit. For an hour, they worked in relative peace. Chloe had a good head for logistics. She could see patterns in the water flow he'd missed. He had practical knowledge of the land she lacked. You're good at this, he said finally. I'm good at organizing things. It's what I was trained for. She hesitated, then admitted quietly. I'm terrified I'll be a failure. Again. My parents' scandal. I couldn't prevent it. I couldn't save our reputation. I was supposed to be perfect enough to balance out their mistakes, and I failed. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Now I'm here, and I don't understand how anything works. And I'm terrified I'll fail you too. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. I don't know how to be the polished gentleman London wants. I only know how to be useful here, on this land, with these people. I spent my childhood watching my father brutalize tenants and staff, and I swore I'd never be that kind of duke. His voice roughed. But I don't know how to be both decent and refined. They seemed mutually exclusive. It was the most honest they'd been with each other since the wedding. I could ride out with you, Chloe offered, to the village. Tomorrow, if the invitation still stands. Surprise flickered across his face, then something that might have been hope. It does. And you could try one formal dinner my way, just to see if it's as terrible as you think. A small smile. Deal. It wasn't friendship yet, but it was the first crack in the wall between them. 3. They rode out the next morning under gathering clouds. Dark, heavy things that promised a storm. Chloe wore her riding habit, perfectly tailored, impractical for actual riding, and sat her horse with the rigid posture her mother had insisted upon. Rowan rode easily beside her, pointing out landmarks, explaining crop rotations and tenant situations. In the village of Thornbury, they found chaos. The bridge over Thornbury Beck had washed out in recent rains, cutting off the smaller hamlet beyond. A family there had failed crops, and a seriously ill child who couldn't reach the doctor. Chloe watched Rowan transform. The slightly awkward man from London society became a decisive leader, organizing repairs, calling people by name, personally hauling timber through increasingly heavy rain. This was a wild duke everyone mocked. But he didn't look wild. He looked capable, needed, real. While Rowan dealt with physical labor, Chloe found her own way to help. She convinced the vicar to open the church hall as temporary shelter, organized food contributions from multiple households, so the burden didn't fall on the poorest families. Used her perfect lady voice, the one that commanded automatic obedience, to persuade a snobbish neighboring landowner to lend wagons and workers. She could play the society game. She was just playing it for good this time. They worked for hours, soaked and exhausted. At one point, Rowan looked across the muddy yard to see Chloe directing volunteers with calm efficiency, and something shifted in his chest. She was still perfect, but it was a different kind of perfect. Useful, practical, human. Chloe caught him staring. What? You're good at this. Better than I expected. I'm good at managing chaos. It's my particular skill. Well, I'm good at creating chaos. We're well matched. They both realized what he'd said. The first time either had suggested they might actually fit together, and looked away, suddenly awkward. The storm worsened. The vicar insisted they stay overnight rather than risk the flooded roads. One cramped guest chamber. 2 people. Separate pallets. They changed into borrowed, ill-fitting dry clothes. Chloe's hair hung loose for the first time since he'd known her. Rowan looked younger without his jacket, more vulnerable. "Thank you for today," he said as they settled on opposite sides of the small room. "For helping. You didn't have to." "Of course I did. Those people needed help." "The London ladies I know would have stayed in the carriage." "Then you know the wrong London ladies." Chloe pulled a blanket around herself. "My mother would be horrified, spending the night in a vicarage. Hair down, no proper chaperone." "Are you horrified?" She considered. "No, strangely, I'm not." In the darkness, with a storm raging outside, they talked more honestly than they ever had. Chloe told him about her childhood. A mother obsessed with appearances. A father whose gambling debts were quietly covered by her perfect behavior. How she'd learned that love was conditional on never making mistakes. Rowan told her about growing up watching his father abuse power, about refusing to ignore mistreatment even when it earned him the reputation for being difficult. How wild was easier than principled but inconvenient. "You're not wild," Chloe said softly. "You just refuse to pretend problems don't exist. And you're not cold. You just learned that showing emotion was dangerous." The observation hit too close. Chloe felt tears threaten and fought them back automatically. "You can cry here," Rowan said. "No one's judging you." "I don't cry." "It's not proper." "Chloe, you're allowed to be human." The gentleness in his voice undid her. Tears spilled over, and she turned away, embarrassed. Rowan moved her palate. Careful, respectful. "May I?" She nodded. He helped her rub warmth back into her chilled hands, his touch careful. Their faces were close in the dim light. For a moment, Chloe thought he might kiss her. She wanted him to. Then panic surged. This was too much, too fast. She pulled back, defaulting to politeness. "We should rest. Tomorrow will be difficult." Hurt flickered across his face, but he respected the boundary. "Of course." "Good night, Chloe." He returned to his own pallet, and they lay in the darkness, both hyper-aware of the other, both confused by what was building between them. The next morning, the storm had passed. Bridge repairs were underway. The Hamlet family could reach the doctor. The village thanked them both, genuinely, warmly. "Our Duke and Duchess," old Mrs. Cooper said, beaming. On the ride home, a new quiet stretched between them. Not hostile, not comfortable, but aware that they might actually fit if they stopped fighting it so hard. 3 weeks of cautious peace followed. They found rhythms. He stopped tracking mud through her drawing room. She stopped trying to formalize every meal. Then the letter arrived. Chloe's mother, writing in her elegant script. "Your presence is required in London for Lady Ashworth Ball. Society is eager to see how the new Duchess of Winthorpe is managing. Do not disappoint us." Underneath, the unspoken command. "Prove the marriage isn't a disaster. Prove you haven't failed us again. Do we have to go?" Rowan asked, reading over her shoulder. "Yes." Chloe's voice was tight. "They'll judge us either way, but if we don't appear, the gossip will be worse." So they returned to London, and Chloe slipped too easily back into old patterns. She corrected Rowan's posture, adjusted his cravat, sent him warning looks when he started to mention tenants or horses, whisper reminders about which fork to use, which names to remember. He bore it at first, try and cooperate, but she could see him withdrawing, becoming stiffer, less himself. At Lady Ashworth's ball, society women cooed over Chloe. "You look radiant, dear. Marriage suits you." They smiled at Rowan with barely concealed condescension. "The Duke is so rustic. How charming." Chloe heard every whisper, felt every judgment, and responded by managing Rowan even more tightly, as if she could force him to fit their expectations through sheer will. The breaking point came at dinner, with her parents. Lord Pemberton, one of her father's acquaintances, was holding forth about estate management. The problem with the lower classes is they don't understand their own limitations. Give them too much voice and they'll demand the world. Rowan's jaw tightened. Chloe touched his hand warningly under the table. My tenants understand their situations perfectly, Rowan said, voice controlled. Often better than landlords who've never missed a meal. Surely you don't let them dictate your decisions? Pemberton laughed. I listen to them. They're not simpletons. They're people whose labor makes my comfort possible. How progressive. Pemberton's tone dripped sarcasm. But impractical, surely. A duke whose rule by his tenants is no duke at all. Better than a duke who exploits them while preaching about natural order. Silence fell across the table. Chloe's mother looked faint. Her father glared murder. Later, in their borrowed London rooms, Chloe finally exploded. Do you know how hard I worked to get them to accept you? Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed to make this marriage look successful? Sacrificed. Rowan's voice was dangerously quiet. Or controlled. You don't want a husband, Chloe. You want a prop that doesn't embarrass you. I want a partner who understands that there are battles worth fighting and battles that only destroy us both. At least I know which battles matter. You just want to survive in a world of people who don't actually care about you. And you want to smash everything and expect me to pick up the pieces. They stood on opposite sides of the room, chests heaving, years of training warring with weeks of connection. I can't be what you need, Rowan said finally. Not if what you need is someone who doesn't exist. He left, slept in the study that night. Chloe lay in bed, shaking, wondering if she just destroyed the one real thing in her carefully constructed life. Later, she heard voices through the wall. Her parents, thinking she was asleep. If this mismatched marriage fails, Chloe will be blamed. As always, her mother's voice weary. At least we got Winthorpe's alliance. That's what matters. Her father, pragmatic as ever. The words hit like ice water. They'd never cared about her happiness. Only about what she could provide them. All those years of perfect behavior, of sacrificing every authentic feeling to maintain their reputation. And she'd never been a daughter to them, just a solution to their problems. Chloe found Rowan on the townhouse balcony, staring at London's lights. I'm sorry, she said. He didn't turn. For which part? For trying to turn you into something you're not. For caring more about what they think than about who you actually are. She moved beside him. I overheard my parents. They only see me as useful, as a tool. And I realize I've been doing the same to you. Now he looked at her. Chloe, I've been trying to control you because I've been taught that love is conditional on perfection. That if I'm not constantly managing everything, it will all fall apart. Tears spilled over. I'm terrified of being myself because every time I showed anything real growing up, I was told it was wrong, inappropriate, a failure. Rowan reached for her hands. You're not a failure. You're the most capable person I know. But capable doesn't mean controlling. I don't know how to be anything else. Then learn with me. His voice was rough. I've been hiding behind, wild, because it's easy to be dismissed and vulnerable. If I don't care what people think, I can't be hurt by their judgment. But I do care. I care what you think. They stood close now, hands joined. I don't want to tame you, Chloe whispered. I want to understand you. And I don't want to break you free from your careful control. I want you to feel safe enough to let it go. This time, when the space between them closed, neither pulled away. The kiss was tentative at first, then deeper, an admission, a promise, a beginning that felt real in a way their formal wedding never had. When they finally pulled apart, Rowan touched her face gently. We're going back to Winthorpe tomorrow. And when we get there, we're starting over. Not as the mismatched marriage everyone expects to fail. As partners building something neither of us could build alone. Chloe nodded, something loosening in her chest. I'd like that. For the first time since their wedding, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. I'm trying to be braver. Chloe managed a smile. You're a terrible influence. Good. They consciously rebuilt their partnership over the following months. Chloe took an active role in estate management, using her social skills to negotiate better deals with suppliers and officials. Her ability to navigate politics protected Rowan's more direct honesty. Rowan supported her setting certain standards in the house, not because London demanded it, but because it made Chloe feel at home. They taught each other. She showed him how to waltz properly for the formal events they couldn't avoid. He stepped on her feet repeatedly, and they collapsed laughing. He taught her to ride with more confidence, less rigid control. She screamed the first time her horse jumped a low fence, then laughed with pure exhilaration. "I thought you'd hate that," Rowan said, grinning. "I thought I would too. Turns out I like feeling alive more than feeling safe." Society's judgment gradually shifted. A neighboring couple visited and found the mismatched pair genuinely happy, clearly in love. Word trickled back to London that perhaps the Wild Duke and the perfect lady weren't such a disaster after all. Some doors stayed closed. Chloe's parents maintained their distance. But other, unexpected connections formed, with progressive families who valued substance over polish. 6 months after their confrontation in London, they hosted a harvest celebration at Winthorpe. Late that evening, after the guests had gone, Chloe and Rowan sat in the kitchen sharing leftover bread and cheese with Mrs. Hedges and the senior staff. Informal, comfortable, real. "If we'd been a perfect match from the start," Chloe said thoughtfully, "same taste, same background, same skills, I think I'd have been bored to tears." "You make me sharper where I'm reckless," Rowan replied. "I help you breathe where you grind yourself to dust, try and be perfect." "That's not mismatched, Chloe. That's fitted." She leaned against his shoulder, and Bruno the dog, still completely undisciplined, put muddy paws on her dress. She barely noticed. The next week, Chloe's young cousin Beatrice came to visit. She was 18, terrified of her own arranged match to a man twice her age. "Were you afraid?" Beatrice asked. "Marrying someone so different from yourself?" Chloe looked out the window. Rowan was in the yard, sleeves rolled up, laughing with the stable boys, utterly himself. 6 months ago, the sight would have mortified her. Now it made her heart warm. "Yes," she said honestly. "I was terrified, but I also learned something important." "What?" "That the right kind of mismatch can be the best kind of love. Not because you're the same, but because your differences make you both better than you'd be alone." She watched Rowan catch sight of her in the window and wave, his face lighting up. She waved back, no longer caring that it wasn't perfectly refined behavior. "The world will tell you that love means finding your perfect match," Chloe continued. "Someone who fits every expectation, meets every requirement. But real love is messier than that. It's learning to value what makes you different instead of trying to file away." Beatrice considered this. "So you're happy? Even though everyone said you wouldn't be?" Chloe smiled, full and genuine. "Especially because everyone said we wouldn't be. We proved them wrong by refusing to fit their definitions." That evening, as she and Rowan walked the estate grounds in the soft twilight, he took her hand. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not trying to be perfect anymore. I like you much better wild." Chloe laughed, a real laugh, not the practiced social one. "I'm not wild. I'm just less afraid." "Close enough." He kissed her, sweet and easy. They'd been called a mismatched marriage, a disaster waiting to happen, a perfect lady and a wild duke who'd never make it work. They'd proven that sometimes the matches that look worst on paper turn out to be the ones that fit best in practice. Not despite their differences, but because of them. Dear listeners, Chloe and Rowan showed us that real partnership isn't about finding someone identical to ourselves, but someone whose strengths balance our weaknesses and whose differences push us to grow. That perfect often means lifeless, while mismatched can mean vibrant, challenging, and deeply, surprisingly right. If this story touched your heart, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing for more tales where love means accepting the whole person, wild edges and polished surfaces alike. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever found that differences made a relationship stronger? Share your reflections in the comments below. Until next time, may you always value the ways you don't match as much as the ways you do. This is a reminder that sometimes the best love stories are the ones that shouldn't work on paper, but shine brilliantly in practice.